Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here. Just wanted to record a quick video introducing the second essay for our 8-week ENC1101 Composition 1 class. And I'm not saying you don't always pay close attention, but please pay close attention to this one because this essay is pretty straightforward, but it often manages to confuse students because it involves doing some stuff, well, frankly, you probably haven't had to do before in your writing. So let's jump right into it. Basically, this is a commercial analysis essay. So what you need to do is find up to, you don't have to max it out, but most students do, up to 3 commercials for the same company or product, right? So for instance, it could be 3 like Nike shoe commercials, but you could pick a company like Apple and let's say, here's a MacBook ad and here's an iPad ad, and here's an iPhone ad, or something like that. But same company, throw up to 3 commercials for the same company or product. And what we're trying to do, what we're trying to argue in the paper is, hey, who do you think, based on the commercials you have chosen, who do you think the main audience or demographic is that the company is trying to appeal to? So this is the part where sometimes students get confused already. It's like, hey, don't these companies want to appeal to as many people as possible? Well, of course they do. They want to sell as much as they possibly can. But, you have a 30-second ad that appears on TV, or maybe these days, like a 15-second ad that appears on like YouTube or TikTok. You can't appeal to everybody in that limited amount of time. So you have to be very focused, like we have a specific audience in mind. So that's what you are trying to figure out. Now, I'll probably reiterate this again towards the end of this video, but you may get to a point where you have to kind of go back to the drawing board. Like, hey, I've got a definite audience figured out for this commercial, or maybe these 2 commercials, but 1 or 2 commercials aren't fitting in. So you might have to go back and, all right, I'm going to find, now that I have an audience in mind, I'm going to kind of cherry pick, another commercial to go in here. All right, so here is the first real curveball of the essay. When it comes to figuring out who the audience is, the audience has to have at least 2 criteria. So here's an example. It's not enough to say, hey, this Dr. Pepper ad appeals to women. Because it's like, oh, are you saying it literally appeals to 51% of the planet? Probably not. So we have to narrow it down at least a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you're not limited to this, but historically, most of my students have used age and gender as their criteria. Example, Dr. Pepper appeals to young women. So at least we have narrowed it down, not all women everywhere, but young women. And I like to think this makes sense when you sit back and think about it for a bit. It's like, okay, if we say that blah, blah, blah appeals to men, it's like, does it appeal to grandpa in the same way that it appeals to your dad? Does in the same way that it appeals to you? In the same way that it appeals to your baby brother? Probably not. The same way that you're, probably not into the exact same thing your parents, grandparents are into. These commercials are they're targeting a very specific audience. So anyways, we'll do a lot more videos and post about this, I think, but that's the essence of it. You're picking up to 3 videos, same company or product, and then trying to figure out, who the audience is. The audience has to have at least 2 criteria here. So I already gave an example earlier, and you don't have to use my boring, like boilerplate phrasing, but it boils down to like company X is appealing to audience Y. Like Dr. Pepper is appealing to young women. Nike is appealing to competitive athletes, stuff like that. And I'll go ahead and tell you, just make sure, please, when you're doing your outlines, and make sure that you actually have 2 different criteria. Every semester that I do this, I get students that are annoyed with me because they'll express a thesis like, this is appealing to young kids. And I'm like, well, that's one criterion. That's age. There is not actually a second criteria there. If you say young kids, you're just saying, young people. And that's, too broad. Same way I was looking at a student paper today, a face-to-face student, and they had done something like that, where it's like, this appeals to, men and women who are athletic. And it's like, you're just saying all athletes. We need to narrow it down a little bit more. So as always, I mean, we're not done with the video yet, but as always, please reach out to me if you have any questions about, the assignment, about narrowing things down. all that fun stuff. All right. Now, the second, like I call it a curveball. It doesn't feel like a curveball, not to me, but I'm the teacher, is that when you're trying to figure out who the audience is, you can't basically use like, Xbox appeals to people who like Xbox, or, I guess that would be Microsoft, but, Microsoft appeals to Microsoft fans. Taylor Swift appeals to Taylor Swift fans. That's not, each of those weird examples I just pull out of my head only has one criterion, each. But also, there's not much analysis you can do. How do we argue? How do we prove that Taylor Swift commercial appeals to Taylor Swift fans? It's like, well, it's not much to say about it. All right, so that brings us to what are you actually doing? Like once you get into the body paragraphs, what are you doing? So when you scratch away, I know how weird this assignment is, but when you scratch away, the weirdness of the assignment, this is technically just another argumentative essay. If I rock up and say, these Coca-Cola commercials are appealing to middle-aged men, other people in the room might say, no, I think it's young men. No, I think it's young women. It's an argument. It's something not everyone is going to agree with. That's what a thesis is supposed to be, something that there's not consensus on. It is an argument. And then what you're doing in the paper is you're going to bring in and analyze elements of the commercial where it's like, hey, how do I know that this is appealing to, say young men? And again, we're going to have some future videos about this, but the way that you go about that, the way that you go about proving who it appeals to, it's the sky's the limit. One of the most basic examples, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I often tell my face-to-face students, you don't overlook the obvious, is 9 times out of 10, if not 99 times out of 100, you can look at the people in the ad as a way of figuring out who they're trying to appeal to. Like I might post a video about this, but there's this Dr. Pepper ad I often show face-to-face students where it's like all the characters are young women. So yes, it's not a stretch to say that the commercial where all the characters are young women is trying to appeal to young women. So sometimes it's simple stuff like that, but you can also go a step further where it's like, okay, is there music in this, like recognizable famous music in the ad? Okay, well, 2 things. One, you can look at like, who is the singer? Is this somebody that is popular with that demographic? Is just having them in there a way, I was joking about Taylor Swift a moment ago. You better believe if you got Taylor Swift, music, you paid a lot actually if you did that, but if you've got Taylor Swift music in your ad, you're probably trying to appeal to young women. But you can also look at the lyrics, right? So the average song is about 2.5 to 3 minutes. The average commercial is 30 seconds. So even if the companies pay, the big licensing fee to use a famous song, they can only, play a portion of it. So why did they play these lyrics? What is it about these lyrics that appeal to this audience? You can get into the dialogue. Are they talking about things that would resonate with this group? You can, I know it sometimes seems old-fashioned, I guess it is old-fashioned, but you can get into color theory and color psychology. Like the same Dr. Pepper ad I often show face-to-face students, it's set, characters are getting ready, they're like bridesmaids and a bride getting ready for a wedding. So everyone's in like white, purple, they're holding pink flowers, and these are stereotypically colors that are coded to appeal to women. Meanwhile, I don't know if I'm fully living up to this today, but like dark colors, like, think dark blue, I guess brown is part of it, are stereotypically coded to appeal to men. All this stuff, pretty much anything you can think of where you're like, and that's how they're trying to reach men. That's how they're trying to appeal to young men, or whatever the group is that you have chosen. Now, I will go ahead and tell you, this doesn't magically make the essay easy, but one of the ways that you can make it easier is to choose a company or product that you like, and then choose a demographic that you belong to, right? So if you are a young woman, and you pick, a company or a product that you enjoy, then you can watch these commercials. And that way, what you're really trying to figure out is, how is the company trying to appeal to you and your group? I just mentioned this because, like, for instance, there's a Dr. Pepper 10 ad that I often show students that's very clearly trying to appeal to middle-aged men. So if you are a young woman, it doesn't mean you can't write about how it's appealing to middle-aged men, but that's obviously going to be a bit more difficult than trying to figure out how it appeals to young women, because you know what appeals to you. You don't necessarily know what appeals to someone completely different from you. All right. So some other stuff about this one. So this is another 5-page paper. So that's double spaced, MLA, Times New Roman, font size 12, all that good stuff. Research is not required. So this is another essay like our first, where if you want to bring research in, that's great. I might, upload some content about research that might help you, prove some of the arguments you're making in the paper, but it's not required. Speaking of citations not being required, you do not have to cite the commercials. I'm fine with you just giving us the commercial names and like describing what happens. You don't have to have parenthetical citations for them or anything silly like that. So I'm looking at and I put a little note here at the end. I'm sorry for the wall of text essay description here. It's just such a weird essay. I wanted to be thorough. But as always, you're graded by the quality of your argument, not the argument itself. I'll never tell you your audience is wrong, but I will tell you we need more or better arguments about why you're right. So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, this isn't make the professor happy. Like, oh, there is a right answer for who they're appealing to. I hope you pick it. Anything like that. It's just, okay, I'm looking at this as an essay. You're writing them for me, well, in the sense that I'm grading them, but technically you're supposed to be writing your essays for default college freshman student audience. So when I'm looking at your essays, when I'm grading your essays, I'm like, do you talk a good game? Does this look like it would convince some of the people, if you showed it to a room full of students, if they read it, would, at least half of them be like, maybe they've got a point. That's what we're aiming for. So that is about it on this one. Like I said, it's please, it sounds weird to hear it from your professor. Don't overthink this one. It's an argumentative essay that has been reskinned, to use a video game term there. So it's just you're picking up the 3 commercials, same company or product, trying to figure out who they're appealing to. The thesis is just company X is appealing to audience Y. Y has to have, at least 2 criteria, like age and gender. This is appealing to young men. This is appealing to middle-aged women, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to be age and gender, though. It can be competitive athletes. It can be imaginative children. You get the idea. If you have any questions, y'all know the drill. If you have any questions about the assignment or about anything else, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.